So here we have the Hero Sprue from the Swamps of Death set for Shadows of Brimstone, and we can pull this out. All four of the hero characters are on one sprue, and you can see that they're actually a little bit of a darker plastic, so it's easier to see them at first glance between a monster and a hero. And so basically there's four different hero classes on here. We have the Indian Scout, who's in two pieces. You've got the main body and then his rifle arms. You've got the Lawman, who's got his body, his hat, and his head. You have the Rancher, who has her body, her hat, her gun arm, and her support arm. And the last one is the Preacher. You have his body, his hat, and his hand holding the book. So we'll go ahead and pop these guys off the sprue here. And again, we're using our clippers, and you want to put the flat end as close to the model as you can so that it's getting as much of the sprue off the figure as you can. And generally you want to hold on to the figure with one hand while you're clipping the last frame so that he doesn't go flying across the table. Now, occasionally you'll get a little piece of extra sprue on the figure like this, and you can either clip that off with the clippers, or you can clip it off with a modeling knife or a file. Now, whenever I'm doing multiple models like this, I'll always put them in little piles, so all the pieces of one model are together in a pile, so that I don't accidentally confuse what pieces go to what figures. So there's the Preacher, here's the Indian Scout. Each of these characters is pretty cool, and they all have their own unique abilities and starting items and skills that they get to use. And they each have their own unique upgrade tree, so when you're playing the game and keeping the same characters from game to game, you can actually choose your path as you progress your character. Now, if you ever have a spot where the piece is too close to an edge frame, you can either use a modeling knife, or you can flip the clippers around so that the flat edge is away from the figure if you need to, just so you can get in there tighter. When you do, that's often where it leaves a little bit of extra flash on there, which you can either cut off with the clippers like that, or that you can use a modeling knife or file to remove. Alright, that's the Lawman. And lastly we have the Rancher here. Now, if you're more comfortable with it, you can clip and assemble each model individually. For the sake of speed, I tend to clip off all the pieces that I'm going to assemble as a group, and then assemble each figure one at a time after I have all the pieces clipped. Alright, so that is all the pieces for the heroes. Now, the heroes are regular size figures, so they go on a 30mm round base. And we'll go ahead and look at the Preacher first. Now you can see he's got a pretty wide base, and there's a little bit of a nub from the sprue there. So it's we recommend that you file that down a little bit, or that you just take a modeling knife and make a quick slice just to take off any extra sprue that happens to have stayed on in there. And you can see that he comes with his three pieces, his body, his hat, and his book. The hat, just, you can see it's got a little triangle shape there that goes like that on the figure. So we'll grab some glue. Now again, you can use either plastic cement or super glue. For these guys, I'll go ahead and just use super glue because it dries a little bit faster. And you can see actually he's got a little bit of flash by the nub that connects his hat to his head. So I'm just going to file that a little bit, or I could use a modeling knife to clean that up, make it just a little bit of a cleaner connection. Alright, and then put a little bit of super glue on there. And again, if you ever feel like you got too much super glue like that, you can just dab a little bit on a little piece of paper or napkin, and that helps to prevent it running all over the place and getting crazy. Okay, so we got his hat put on there, and now it's time for his arm. And it's a good idea when you're putting a multi-piece figure together to just do a dry fit to see how it's going to go, how it's going to fit together, and then you can put the glue on and actually attach the pieces. Alright, so that's it for the preacher, and we can go ahead and just put a little bit of glue on his feet there, and then attach him to the base. And generally you want to put the figures as centered on the base as you can. And if we just hold him there for a second, the glue will be dry enough to set up, and then we can just set him off to the side. Alright, we'll look at the Indian Scout next. So he's just got his two parts here, his body and his arm with the rifle, his arms. And you can see there's two connection points here. He's got his right hand and his left arm at the elbow. And so basically we'll just put a little bit of glue in both spots and then put the rifle on. So a little bit of glue there, a little bit of glue there. If you feel like you have excess, you can just dab a little bit of it off. And then just attach these parts. Now anytime you're using super glue, it's very easy to accidentally glue your fingers together, and that can be kind of unpleasant, so be careful. And we'll put a little bit of glue on his feet. And then grab a base and just center him on there. Hold him for a second. And once he's been held for a second, he'll usually grip pretty tight. Okay, we'll look at the lawman next. You can see he's got a little bit of extra stuff on there, so I could use a file, but I'll use a hobby knife to just cut a little bit off the top to make that a nice connection point. Now with the lawman, he's got his head and neck basically slide into this slot on the body. And then the hat goes on top of that. So now that I've dry fitted, I'll go ahead and put a little bit of glue in there and put his head on. Now again, if you're planning on painting your figures, it's not a bad idea to go through and file off all of the excess molding lines so that it gives a cleaner figure and looks a little nicer when you paint them. But it's certainly not needed for assembly. And put a little bit of glue on the nub on his head. And we'll put the hat right on that nub. And again, the shapes of the pegs tell you exactly how the pieces are going to fit. Oops. Alright. So there he is. He's got his head and his hat. And we can just attach some super glue on his feet. And center him on the base. He is also good to go. So we got just one left here. It's the rancher. So we can look. Now the rancher is kind of interesting because she's got one arm holding the rifle, which basically can only go in one way like that. And then the other arm is stuck into her shoulder, and the hand goes under the rifle. So with this particular one, I'm going to actually use plastic cement because it lets me wiggle the things around a little bit more as they're gluing. So I'll put a little bit of glue in the shoulder here and attach the rifle arm first. Because it doesn't set quite as quickly as super glue, it gives you a little bit more wiggle room to move the pieces around, which can be really helpful if you're attaching multiple pieces at the same time. So put a little bit in the shoulder, and then with this you can see there's a notch in the rifle. We can put a little bit of glue there so that when we have the hand attached to it, it's got something to hold on to. Alright, so we slide the arm peg into the shoulder, and then you can see the hand is meant to connect with the rifle right there. So we can just scoot it over and press it together, and now you can see that the hand connects both at the shoulders and at the rifle. And you can see her hat has the little peg there, the little notch forward, so it'll fit right on her head. So we'll give a little bit of glue. And we'll go ahead and slide her hat right on with the notch forward. Press it down. And that is your Ranger. So let's go ahead and put some glue on her feet. And again, for the feet, I'm just going to use super glue so it attaches a little bit faster. And I noticed that there's a little bit of a nub on the bottom of her foot, so I'll just cut that off with an X-Acto as well. Okay. A little bit of super glue so it dries faster. And center her on the base. Hold her in place for a second there, just long enough to get her to stick. And you have a finished set of 4 heroes from Shadows of Brimstone, the Swamps of Death.